Good night, Belizeans at home and abroad. This is the Belizean Affairs Show number 364. 364. We're running a little late today. Nevertheless, we're happy to know that you have tuned in or you will be tuning in at your own convenience, whether while the show is live and or later on after it's posted. Uh, my name is Leonard Brackett, and I will be your chairman for tonight's show. I'll start off with a short word of prayer, and I'll defer the scripture reading for tonight since I don't have a scripture reading available. And we'll just go straight into the program as we're running a little bit late. And we want to do the best we can for tonight and try and finish on time if possible. Again, my name is Leonard Brackett, and I'll be your chairman. I'll just bow my head and say a short prayer. Divine loving Father, we thank thee for this privilege to come before thy presence once more. We pray that thou mayest accept our humble expression of gratitude and thankfulness to thee for first of all giving us the privilege of life, and secondly the opportunity to still be alive among our family members, friends, and loved ones today. We pray that thou mayest bless our country of Belize, its people and leadership, that thou will also bless this country of the United States of America, its people and leadership, and that thou will bless the rest of humanity according to their needs, loving Father. Thou knowest our hearts, our desires, even our most secret thoughts. Please continue to abide with us. Please continue to grant us health, courage, strength, perseverance, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, endurance, and a bit of fortitude to be able to speak truth to power as needed. We ask these mercies in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you very much. And again, I'll be your chairman for tonight's show. And let me see if I can find the exact item that I was looking for. My stories, and then I'll find, I think this is it. Let's see. Okay. All right. So for tonight show, since it's an emergency backup show, running late at that, I'm going to use one of our other panelists' writings for tonight. And we're going to be dealing with some legal and case law matters that relates to the Constitution of Belize. G. Brack had written a legal commentary, which I'm going to use as the basis for my broadcast tonight. And he went on to say, selective justice is a violation of the Constitution, and Belizeans must demand better. Tonight, he said, being about 5 years ago, not tonight that I'm broadcasting the show, but the night at the time when he was putting together this legal commentary, he said, tonight, as Justice Nigel Pilgrim prepares to sentence Michael Cavo, a father who could face up to 15 years for child cruelty, the country must confront a much bigger issue. He went on to say, the uneven, unpredictable, and selective way justice is being delivered in Belize. Under Section 6 of the Constitution of Belize, every person is entitled to equal protection under the law. Not equal sometimes, not equals when convenient, but equal always. He went on to say, but what we are witnessing in the complete, what we are witnessing is the complete opposite. And he went on to elaborate by saying, just today, age, oh, I'm sorry, he went on to say, just days ago, the DPP decided to withdraw uh, charges from a young woman who shot and killed a man, calling it, the DPP calling it self defense. Whether people agree or not, a life was taken. Yet, compassion and leniency was shown, not necessarily to the victim, but the perpetrator of that act that did the killing. Of course, we all know that there are meritorious cases where somebody kills someone else in self defense, legitimate self defense we're talking about, not a claim of self defense when there may not be any actual merits and or true, valid circumstance to mitigate self defense as being the category under which someone can be exculpated or pardoned or excused for committing the crime of killing someone else. Would that be in the terms of murder or would it be in the terms of uh, it's a homicide? It's someone killing someone else. And whether or not that amounts to and or can be legally or realistically classified as a true self-defense set of circumstance, then that person should be looked upon with some level of leniency, and maybe the charge for killing could be constituted as manslaughter in various degrees, first degree, second degree, or manslaughter by negligence, or manslaughter in self-defense. But a man was killed. A man was slaughtered. So at the least, it could be a manslaughter charge with some kind of mitigating circumstances that will allow for a lower threshold sentence if the person were to be found guilty after a trial or during the course of a trial. But there was no trial in this case because the DPP decided to change the circumstance from the person being arrested and being remanded for trial to one where the DPC, within her purview and prerogatives, as is vested in her according to the laws of Belize and the Constitution of Belize, that she can exercise discretion in regards to certain constitutional, legal, and case law matters. She can proceed to have a case be heard in the court, or she can truncate the hearing of that case by declaring a nolle prosequi or uh, um, homicide by virtue of self-defense. And or if there's not sufficient evidence to prove that the murder was done uh, maliciously or with uh, pre there's a legal term for it. I can't bring it up right now, but premeditated. I'm sorry, that's the category that I was trying to bring forward. if something is not premeditated and or done with malice, as is said in the legal format, malice aforethought or malice with previous thinking or planning, then without malice aforethought, a person could not necessarily be proven, or not necessarily proven, I'll take that word back, but could not necessarily be classified and or as a guilty person in committing that crime as a wanton crime, which is punishable then by the different gradations of punishment set out in law. So hopefully I'm not leaving anyone behind in terms of what I'm trying to explain or how I'm explaining it and the words that I'm using to explain this particular circumstance. Because yes, there may be some meritorious factor and or some valid uh, cause for that gentleman to have lost his life, because one can say uh, one can say, for example, that the person that gentleman was assaulting at the time was in a circumstance where that person could have lost their life had that gentleman continued the assault of trying to choke that person to death, which was apparently his intention, before the next person who gained possession of the gun was able to use the gun to stop that person from killing the other lady, from stopping the man, shooting the man, apparently to disable him, not necessarily shoot him to kill him, because it wasn't like a whole lot of shots that would have conveyed a malicious thought, a premeditated action with the intent to commit murder. The circumstances prevailing around that particular uh, case or instance was that somebody's relative was being harmed by someone who intended to cause grievous harm, bodily harm, and deadly harm, as in the case of trying to choke somebody to the point of killing them. Had he not been shot, then he probably would have turned his anger, if that other young lady didn't have a gun, on the other young lady and kill her just as well. So the culprit in this particular instance is not the person who shoot in the defense of herself and the defense of her other family member, but the person who was actually committing the crime of assaulting them in the first instance. So while I may not personally disagree with the DPP, Mr. Brackett, Greg, as in this case, in his summation and commentary, has stipulated that yes, the judgment, I mean, the law allows for these type of circumstance, but when you're going to have this law being implemented with some kind of a judgment where you're giving preference to one person over another in regards to harm, where the justice seems to be giving an excuse or allowing for an excuse, meritoriously or not, to the fact that a murder was committed, a life was lost, and not even a manslaughter charge was brought before the court, because that any charges was actually truncated at the level of the DPP's discretionary legal options. Whereas, as Mr. Brackett went on to stipulate, there was another case with a gentleman who had committed a crime as well, but in that crime, there was nobody who got killed or who lost their life. There was no manslaughter, either by negligence and or by justifiable cause or for whatever other reason or basis. So he compared both of those scenarios and showed that justice in one instance seemed to have been fair, while justice in the other instance did not get the same level of fairness. And I'll proceed to read a little bit more of his Mr. Gregory Brackett dissertation or commentary. And it says, okay. He went on to say, now, compare that to this case. When he's referring to that, he's referring to the previous case that I mentioned, where the young lady apparently was exculpated or exonerated and or given a pass for having committed homicide, the killing of another human being. Mr. Brackett went on to say, now compare that or this particular case, which we have just referred to. He says, no life was lost, no weapons was fired in this particular case, and no one died. I'm sorry, I probably no. No section 6. Okay. Yeah, I was at the correct spot, and I did mention about the other case before, but I had not read the issue that relates to it. It says, and no one died. Yet the full weight of 15 years imprisonment is suddenly on the table. Two different cases, as the previous case that I had discussed, and now the other case that Mr. Brackett alluded to in his discussion. I'll proceed. It says, two different cases, two different outcomes, but the same DPP. And what is referred to here as the DPP is the Director of Public Prosecution. It's a position to be held by someone of legal authority vested by the Constitution of Belize in the country of Belize in Central America. And that person is authorized with the power to prosecute on behalf of the country anyone who violates the criminal codes of the country, whether it be the Prime Minister or any other minister subordinate to him, and or any other person, whether that person be another judge or jury, executioner, police officer, defense personnel, average citizen, or wealthy citizen. The DPP is empowered to bring cases to the court on behalf of the public. And the DPP is given certain discretion within the law and the system of governance, legal governance of our country. So the question here that Mr. Brackett is bringing forward is, we have the same DPP, and we have the same system, and we have two different outcomes to two different cases, one of which someone lost their life, and the other one did not lose any lives. But the one that lost the life gets off a lot easier than the one where a life was lost. I'm sorry. The one where a life was lost gets off easier than where there was no life lost, is the correct way of expressing what I was saying just now. So I stand corrected in terms of how I verbalized it previously as compared to how I verbalized it thereafter or secondly. I'll continue reading nevertheless. Where is the consistency? He questioned Mr. Brackett. Where is the uh, proportionality? He questioned again. And he also went on to question by saying, where is the constitutional fairness? As he continued to allude by saying, you cannot justify withdrawing a homicide case entirely, but then push for the harshest penalty on a father in a case that, whilst serious itself, does not involve the taking of a life. He went on to say, this is not about excusing wrongdoing. This is about cons- consistency and equality, treatment, equal treatment, and the rule of law. Belizeans are right to ask the following question: why is empathy shown to some and not to others? Why does mercy flow freely in one case but disappears completely in the other? Why are ordinary citizens treated with the harshest hand while others walk free? He went on to say, or Mr. Brackett went on to say, our Constitution promises one Belizean, one justice system, not two. Yet the DPP's decision are creating two realities. That is to say, a justice system of leniency for some and a justice system of maximum punishment for others. In his dissertation, he also went on to say the people have the right and the duty to question these contradictions. A justice system, he said, that is not applied evenly is not real or true justice. A constitution that is not respected because meaningless, I'm sorry, a constitution that is not respected becomes meaningless. And a DPP that uses discretion unevenly undermines public trust in the entire legal system. He also went on to say, Belize deserves a justice system that reflects fairness, consistency, and equal protection under the law, as stipulated in the Constitution of Belize under Section 6. Not selective prosecution based on who the accused is. He went on to say, finally, that until that happens, the people will continue to speak out because silence would be a betrayal of the very Constitution that protects us all. And I would say thanks to Mr. Gregory Brackett for penning such lucid and concerned commentary. As a matter of fact, I think he deserves an applause for his humanship. Nevertheless, it is not just the DPP whom Mr. Brackett was calling to question here in regards to why exercise the prerogative vested in her to be lenient with one person in regards to a particular crime where a life is lost and not exercise some measure of similar justice in a circumstance where a crime was committed that did not involve the loss of any life. As in this case, the person who committed the crime that Mr. Brackett alluded to is a father who is looking at 15 years in jail for not having killed no one. And the young lady who, because she's a female and defending her family member, will walk free, at least as of this point in time. If that person was a male, the charges would have been held up against him because he would have been charged not with the emotional or within the emotional context of being a female, a weaker sex or a weaker person who was subjected to the potential loss of her own life and therefore had to do something about it or did do something about it. A man who found himself in the same situation very likely would have been tried, and maybe at the point of when they were supposed to be convicted and sentenced, some mitigating circumstance would have been brought about on his behalf to then give him a lighter sentence. But very unlikely for male to confront with the similar type scenarios we're discussing here tonight and be allowed to get off by the virtue of self-defense alone. We have had cases on top of cases. We have had what you call settled cases, which have established what is deemed to be the standard of the law in our society. As a matter of fact, I'll take you back a little further and contextualize with history a little bit of what we're talking here tonight and what Mr. Brackett alluded to in his dissertation and or commentary, which I just used as part of our program for tonight. Does anyone remember the lady I think it was in the 50s? I recall her name just now and it's getting away from me. But the lady had killed the police officer, burned the police officer in self-defense. I keep her name is on the point of my tongue, but I can't spit it out properly. So I'm falling a little bit short on that. Nevertheless, that lady was convicted, even though she had a legitimate claim of self-defense and self-protection. This young lady that was given a pass by the DPP, if it was the DPP that found that lady that burnt the police officer guilty of her crime and whose life was forfeited, Nora Parham was the name of the lady I'm talking about. They hung that lady because she unlived another human being. And that another human being was someone who physically had been beating up on Miss Nora Parham over a long period of time that Miss Nora Parham suffered at that gentleman's hand, all because that gentleman was someone of authority in the community. Okay? So right there, again, I'm going to stipulate a differentiation in terms of how the DPPs, within the purview of the authority vested in them and the discretion that they can exercise, can cause the exercise of that discretion to appear to be biased, which is a more appropriate term to use because it fits both the legal as well as the societal norms of pronouncement. I would say in the case of Ms. Nora Parham, she was declared guilty when she legitimately had a self-defense scenario. She had more of a self-defense scenario than this young lady. If you stretch the chewing gum long enough after chewing it, you'll realize that after the sweet is gone, the chewing gum is still a piece of chicle. So the loss of a life is the loss of a life, and whether that piece of chewing gum have sugar in there or not, it doesn't change the fact that there's a loss of life. It just changes the fact that if there's some sweet in that piece of chewing gum or that chicle, people will still chew it some more. Therefore, one can say, long after the fact of Miss Nora Parham's hanging for having committed a manslaughter, so many years after now, we come to a scenario where the present DPP is able to use the powers vested in her and exercise that power within her own discretion. And her discretion is different than the discretion of the DPP and the judges back in Ms. Parham's days. First of all, that gentleman that was beating up on Ms. Parham and was trying to kill Ms. Parham in many instances did not succeed at doing so, that Ms. Parham feared for her own life and well-being. She had a claim of self-defense and or of needing to have a reprieve for the crimes that were being committed against her under the color of law, because that gentleman was a lawman. He was committing crimes under the color of law and getting away with it. But back in those days, you cannot assault a police officer or someone who wears what used to be called back in those days the Queen's police uniform, because just by doing that, assaulting a police officer, whether right or wrong, justified or not, you go to spend some months in jail just for assaulting someone who is wearing that uniform. I'll go a little further in the explanation of what I'm trying to say here tonight to tell you I'm not talking off the top of my head, or I'm not talking just about history, and I'm not just talking about something that just happened recently, and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Because I'll explain to you. I, Leonard Brackett, experienced such a situation in terms of not somebody dying, but as regards to the last statement that I made about Mr. Parham offending or assaulting someone who at that time was wearing the police uniform. That happens in the 50s, I believe. But I happen to have a scenario in the 1970s where a police officer who was wearing the Queen's uniform, who under his employment status is considered to be a peace officer. He stepped up behind me and without justifiable cause slapped me across my ears corner. Now, those of you Belizeans who are hearing me tell this story now and probably heard it before will say, what got into that police officer, or what authority or right as a peace officer he had in order to exercise that particular option to slap me across my ears corner in such a way as he did. He didn't have any authority over me as a law-abiding citizen for him to arbitrarily and capriciously come after me and assault me, other than for the fact that I was the leader or one of the leaders of a particular demonstration. And probably in his mind, he figured if he intimidates one of the leaders, the demonstration will break up and everybody will run and, scatter about and go about their business and find their way home. Well, unfortunately, He may have heard me said it before then, that anybody that attacks me or assaults me or does anything to me will have to suffer the consequence of what they have done. That was a known commodity back in those days. I used to get up in the restaurant and I used to speak to those issues and verbalize those circumstances. So I am not of the opinion that this gentleman may not have heard or known that he was assaulting someone who believed in self-preservation and who believed in his own rights. I was always defending the rights of others. What makes you think I won't defend my own right? Are you stupid, ignorant, or both? Or maybe you're taking it for granted that because he is a police officer, that grants him the privilege to commit a crime under the color of law and be exculpated. No, that's not the Leonard Brackett any of you know. Because this Leonard Brackett have always said, when it comes to the protection, preservation, and the rights of the Belizean people, I am no respecter of person, whether that person be the governor of Belize at the time. In those days, we used to have a governor. Whether it be a premier, because in those days we never had prime minister, we had a premier. Whether it be a minister or any other minister, whether it be a judge, whether it be a police officer, or whoever, any other civilians that would assault me would have to suffer the consequence of their conduct. Everybody has a right to do what they want, but they are also accountable to suffer the consequences of what they do on the basis of doing what they want, exercising their rights. Their right to do what they want is precluded from being able to be exercised at the extent of violating somebody else's rights. Anytime you get to the point of wanting to or violating somebody else's right, you have forfeited your right. You have no legal, constitutional, God-given prerogative to claim that you have a right to abuse anyone else or hurt anyone else. You're precluding from exercising any such perceived right. Because while you may perceive that you have a right to do so, you're not entitled to exercising any such rights. The Constitution of Belize precludes you from doing that. The moral compass of humanity and the preservation of self-preservation, as I often say, self-preservation is the basis for creation. Anybody that is put in a situation of duress where they have to defend themselves or others, because the law also authorizes other people to come to the defense of others. If someone is in mortal danger, you are authorized to use your weapon or your gun, registered gun, to defend that person, to save that person's life from somebody who would wantonly take anyone else's life, who, because of that attitude of wanting to take somebody else's life, at the point of you exercising that option to go and take somebody else's life, you're forfeiting your own. I went on to say, as part of what I was clarifying just now, when I said I happen to have gotten myself in a situation, or I shouldn't even say gotten myself. I was put in a situation where this officer committed a crime against me, and I swung around and hit him with a billiards cue. I don't know how many of you out there who are listening to this particular program understand or know what a billiards cue is. I hope that most of you would. But I, at that time, used to walk around with a little walking stick that was made from a billiards cue. Cut off the narrow end of it, and I kept the fat end of the billiards cue. And that billiards cue had a monkey design on it with fangs and rhinestone eyes. And it was a handy piece of craft work. And I used to walk with it, like doing what for those who go way back and remember Billery, a gentleman that we used to call him, I think that was his nickname, Billery, because of the way he used to walk and snap, and he had a cagey way of walking, right? So we used to call it the Billery walk, or the Billery. And so I was doing my Billery walk with my jingo baton. That's what I used to call it, a jingo baton, created from this large end of the billiards cue. And at the time when the gentleman slapped me, I had that stuff in my hand, and I spinned around, and I hit the head of the person whose hand I saw moving away from my face, not recognizing in time that I was actually hitting a police officer. And the end result of that was that the gentleman had 9 stitches in his head, which we went to court on eventually. But at the time when he got whopped in his head, he and his other officers tried to pile up on top of me. And my crowd was much more substantively bigger than the amount of officers that was available to him at that time. And so my crowd piled on top of them. And I was able to crawl out from underneath the whole, the whole conglomerate of people climbing on top of each other, And this had happened because we had a march that was coming down during the September celebration time. This march was coming down from Memorial Park, going across the bridge, big bridge, or the swing bridge, as some people would remember it being called or named, to go over. For those of you who know about the over business, those who are on the south side talk about going over, they talk about going to the north side of Belize. And those who live on the north side, when they say they're going over, they're talking about going over to the south side of Belize, because the city has a river running down the middle of it. So there are those who, even up to today, some people talk about why are going over. And that's because they're on one side of the river or the other, and they're attempting to go to just the opposite side of the river, on the other side of the tongue. And so I ran from between those people after getting slapped and having whipped the officer in his head with the jingle button. I ran through Central Park, because this situation happened because we went from Memorial Park, like I said, and we were attempting to go all the way to Yarborough, go down Albert Street, and then go to Yarborough to disperse the celebration march. And that celebration march had about 5,000 plus people involved in it. And as we passed the Guatemalan consulate upstairs at Romax building in front of Roody's, the crowd decided that they wanted to chant a phrase against the Guatemalans who were claiming our country. And therefore, some of them circled the whole block from Albert Street all the way around to Bishop Street, down on Canal side, coming back up on Church Street, and then joining up back with the tail of the march that was still coming across the bridge back on Albert Street. So I was standing on Church Street at the time when this officer came up behind me and did his good deeds according to him. And so when the crowd was piling up on each other, when the officers were trying to grab at me, I cleared out from underneath. I went through Central Park, went over big bridge on the other side of, went through Central Park to Regent Street, and then from Regent Street across the bridge, big bridge or swing bridge as we would call it. And on the other end of swing bridge or big bridge, a taxi was coming, and I jumped in the taxi and went home. So Mr. Golson came, who was a lawyer at the time, and who was my mentor, political mentor, and said that the police department wanted me to show up at the police department so that particular police can make a complaint against me and that they could get my side of the story because the police officer wanted to take me to court on the matter. And I told Mr. Golson I was hesitant about going to the police station because normally in those situations, what they do is they take the person and they try to beat them up and put them into the jail and beat them up in jail and all kind of other craziness. And I'm not going to avail myself to any police officer to try and pull that kind of shenanigan on me. They knew where I was living. If they wanted me, they could come and get me, and I was at home waiting for them to come and get me, and they didn't show up for 3 days. So my grandmother was in Belize at the time. I came from the States to visit. And she get to find out what had happened. And Mr. Golson spoke with her, and Mr. Golson told her to tell me that he would be my defense lawyer and that he would accompany me to the station to make sure that they didn't try to do what I was alleging that they might want to do, because that's what they used to do in those days. And we had already pre-planned that if they were to harm any of us in the leadership of our organization, that we'll take matters into our own hand. And nevertheless, Mr. Golson convinced my grandmother, and my grandmother convinced me to go along with Mr. Golson, and so I did that. And they decided right there and then, the same very day that I went to the police station for them to take my statement and to lodge a formal complaint against me by the officer, the very same day, they had a hearing in court. So Mr. Golson took me over to the hearing, and we were in the court. And I'm telling this story because I've told it a few times to different people, but this is part of what you'd call the unwritten history of Belize political affairs, okay? I was one of the persons who instigated the creation of what is now known as the United Democratic Party. I have been and continue to be someone who is seriously engaged in the political affairs of my country. And I don't need anyone's authority to act as an ambassador on behalf of my country or to act as a vanguard of my country, or I don't need anybody's authority or acquiescence for me to perform on behalf of my country. I swore in my own blood that I'll do that until I die. So taking you back to the situation with Mr. Golson, taking me over to court as requested by the police department for a hearing in regards to the police officer having his 9 stitches in his head and his bandage displaying. We went to the court, and the judge told the police officer's lawyer to present his case, to state his case. So while the officer lawyer was talking to the judge, or, I was trying to get Mr. Golson's attention, my lawyer attention, to tell him that I would like to plead guilty to the crime of hitting the officer, but with a cause. And Mr. Golson was trying to explain to me that that's not how the court works, that I just can't interrupt the court and ask the judge to accept a plea of guilty from me, but with a cause, because the lawyer that was speaking has to finish his presentation, and then Mr. Golson was going to be given an option or an opportunity to defend me. In my haste, I just wanted the case to be over with, and all I was hoping for was to get a lesser amount of penalty for having committed such a crime, because I knew for a fact that, the evidence is there. The man had the bandages, the 9 stitches, and there's no way that I could get out of such a crime knowing that I assaulted someone who was wearing the Queen's uniform. And just on that basis alone, you expect to get a few months in jail, in addition to whatever other crime had occurred. And so I was trying to get Mr. Golson's attention and talking in the court, disturbing the court while the other lawyer was speaking. And so the judge, in his own rights and in his own wisdom, and according to the process, procedures, and protocols of the court, looked over towards where the commotion between me and Mr. Golson was going on, and he addressed Mr. Golson, being a member of the bar, and he asked Mr. Golson, why is Mr. Golson interrupting his court? As if he, Mr. Golson, shouldn't have known better that the process and procedures of the court is that once the judge asked the other lawyer to speak, that nobody else in his court should be interacting or disturbing or speaking. So Mr. Golson, when the judge asked him that question, why was he disturbing the judge's court? Mr. Golson responded by saying, Your Honor, I was just trying to explain to my client, that being the client being myself, Leonard Brackett. Mr. Golson said, I was just trying to explain to my client that what he was attempting to get me to do is not proper, or is not the correct way how the system works. That I had to wait until the other lawyer finished, and until you give me a permission to speak, in order for me to present what my client was trying to talk to me about just now. And that is what was causing the commotion. So the judge asked me to stand up. And then he asked me, well, didn't your lawyer try to advise you how the court works? And, I was a little heady back in those days. I thought I knew what I really didn't know. I was just, learning some of those things. I was studying law at the time as well. So I was, but I was a little heady, like I said. I'm not exculpating myself. No, I might try to be funny. Right? I'm just telling a story that happened that was not recorded in its totality. Nevertheless, the judge asked me, why was I disturbing his court? And why is it that my lawyer is saying that I wanted to plead guilty with a cause when it wasn't my turn to even talk? Much less, why am I even trying to plead guilty when the case hasn't been submitted yet to the court? And that's the process that they were in. So I said, Your Honor, I was just trying to save the court some time by pleading guilty and not having a long drawn out case process, and just explain my reason or the cause that gave me the reason to have hit the gentleman, and then hope that the court will see that I was not the aggressor, that the officer who is supposed to be a peace officer assaulted me without due cause. So the judge told Mr. Golson he will hear me in terms of, the details of the cause. So the judge, after the judge gave me the permission to continue talking, I explained what the cause was. I said, the gentleman is here, rightfully so, with a busted head, and I'm the person that did that. But that didn't just happen out of the blue. I didn't just go and wantonly assaulted an officer. I'm not that stupid. The officer assaulted me, and I didn't realize it was an officer because the officer came from behind me and slapped me across my ears corner, and I just turned around and hit the head of the person whose hand was coming from my face. He assaulted me, and all I was trying to do was defend myself. So the judge told me to stop talking, and he asked me, no, he told me to stop talking, and then he asked the police officer. He said to the police officer, "Is what Mr. Brackett saying true?" And the police officer, being caught flat-footed, kind of hesitated and was trying to respond in a different way rather than answering the straightforward question from the judge. And the judge said he didn't want to hear anything else other than the answer to the question that he, the judge, had posed. The question was, is what Mr. Brackett is saying true? That is to say, the police officer was the aggressor. He assaulted me, and as a result of assaulting me, in my defense, without recognizing that it was an officer that I was hitting, I hit the person whose hand has just assaulted me. And the gentleman was mumbling and babbling and he said, "But Your Honor, I was," and the judge said, "I don't want to hear the buts. I just want to hear the answer. Is what Mr. Brackett said true?" Then the police officer said, "Yes, Your Honor, but," and he didn't have a chance to continue the but because, like the judge had already said, he didn't want to hear any buts. He just wanted to hear the answer to the question. And the answer to the question was, yes, what I was saying was true. I hit him because he first hit me. He committed a crime under the color of law against an unarmed civilian without justification, other than for the fact of provoking me to commit myself to doing something that he, as an officer, would have been able to justifiably say, well, I did something to him, or I misbehaved, or I did, he was trying to instigate a situation that as what you'd call what's the phrase for they call it? An agent provocateur. He was not acting as an agent of the police department, even though at that time on duty and wearing the police department. He was acting as a provocateur person, trying to get me to commit a crime that I would have been justifiably, sent to jail for. And the judge, after the judge heard it, the gentleman said, or the police officer said, "Yes, Your Honor, but," the judge told Mr. Golson, my lawyer, he said, "Mr. Golson, take your client and leave my courtroom." At that time, I was kind of flabbergasted. I didn't realize what was happening to the extent that the case at that time was being thrown out of court because of the police officer's misconduct. I was still of the opinion that somewhere along the line I would have gotten a lesser sentence, which is what all I was hoping for my participation in the process. And the judge was telling Mr. Wilson for he and his client to leave. I didn't really, my mind was still up in a different area at the time. And I was still trying to figure out the way how I should get left, because at that time I also had kids, I had 2 kids at that time and one on the way. And I didn't want to go spend no long term in jail, whether I was guilty or not. I was hoping at least to minimize the guilt by claiming my rights for self-defense. So Mr. Golson said, let's go. And while he was saying, let's go, like I said, I was kind of flabbergasted because now I'm talking about the story, but at the time when the story was going on, within the context of timing and circumstance, I was kind of baffled. Because Mr. Golson understood the implication of what the judge was implying or stipulating at the time. I did not grasp it right there and then or right away until after the fact. And while we were walking out of the courtroom, being led by Mr. Golson to try and hurry, get out there before maybe the judge could change his mind or something else gets said that, mitigates furtherance of the process. The judge, while we were walking out, the judge was lambasting that officer, because he told him, you come to court pretending that you are the aggrieved person after having committed crimes under the color of law and assaulting a civilian without cause. And the fact that you got hurt, no, you want to use your being hurt to railroad that civilian into meeting some obligation to the state and to you for his defending himself. And the judge went on to scold that gentleman. And at that time, I was feeling sorry for the gentleman, right? Because he came to court with a busted head as his proof of the assault, but tried to lie to the judge and hoodwink the judge. And the judge didn't take that lightly. So the judge apparently threw out the case and told the gentleman where to go jump. And I'm laughing now, but it wasn't a laughing matter back in those days because seriously, I thought I would have been in jail. Nevertheless, they wanted me to go to jail, and because the judge didn't send me to jail, they had plans to do as they normally would have been doing anyhow back in those days. All politically oriented person. I won't say who the gentleman was that slapped me, police officer. I'll just leave that for some other occasion, maybe when I feel like I have a need to bring it up. But for right now, I want to get back to the last part of the program of the writings that Mr. Brackett had done, Mr. Gregory Brackett. And I want to afford. Oh, no. I went into the wrong area. I need to go here so I can find what I was choosing. Okay, I found it again. And I'm going to just open it up again and just read the last part of it. Well, the show is not due to be closed until another 25, 55, another 35, 30, another 30 minutes thereabout. So I'll just finish read up the last part of Mr. Brackett's commentary so I can close that out. And then I'll, in the interest of fairness to those who have spent their valuable time to listen to tonight's presentation, I want to make sure that I do justice to your expectation. And while I'm tempted to believe that I've done a little bit of the justice in terms of what I was articulating just now as part of my own personal history, to show that not only the instance or instances that we first described in the beginning of the program in terms of how justice is met and dished out to different people, and how the DPP, with her discretion currently, has apparently two circumstances, one that involves a murder and the other one that did not involve the loss of any life, but that Mr. Brackett is questioning, how then can't some leniency be afforded to this father so he doesn't have to go and spend the 15 years that is being alleged as a consequence of his actions, so he can spend that 15 years or maybe a part of it with a lesser sentence, just as was declared for the young lady in self-defense, a lesser sentence, as a matter of fact, an exculpation because of self-defense, that this father could be afforded the same leniency or somewhat of a leniency. Of course, a crime is a crime, and if you do the crime, you should be able to do the time. But in this sense, Mr. Brackett is imploring for some leniency in regards to this gentleman not having to spend all those years in jail, and then his child having to do without his father and all the consequences that mitigates such a outcome. So I'll just proceed to read the rest of this thing, like I said, and get out of that. And hopefully, my personal experience that I've offered tonight would be like a little drop in the, what should you call it? A little nugget, right? A historical nugget, by the way, as well as a personal nugget in terms of people learning something about my own biography, which I have not completed the writing of as of today yet, because I'm involved with quite a few other endeavors along that same vein or line, books that I'm currently involved with and writing. But now some people may know a little bit more about me than what they probably thought they knew before. And I hope it's a good part that you get to know and learn and contextualize rather than the bad part. Take the good from the bad and make the best use of the good. Dispense with the bad. Take the bad from the good. Get rid of the bad and make best use of the good. That's the way I've lived my life. And I would like to finish this reading, like I said, because I'd like to add a little bit more information in terms of the Constitution and how our leaders in the country are bastardizing it and are giving us mismanagement, misgovernance. So Mr. Brackett went on to say here, the people have the right and the duty to question those contradictions. A justice system that is not applied equally is not justice, he said. He also went on to say, a constitution that is not respected becomes meaningless. And he also said, a DPP that uses discretion unevenly undermines public trust in the entire legal system. He went on to add two other small paragraphs, which I'll proceed to read, by saying, Belize deserve a justice system that reflects fairness, consistency, and equal protection under the law as stated in and required and mandated in Section 6 of the Constitution of Belize, and not selective prosecution based on who the accused is. His last paragraph goes on as follows. Until that happens, that is to say, justice for all under an equal justice under the law, regardless of whether you have money or not, until that happens, the people will continue to speak out because silence would be a betrayal of the very Constitution that protects us all. And that was the end summation of Mr. Brackett's commentary in regards to equal justice under the Constitution of Belize. And there are also other sections that could have been cited in regards to the justice and judicial system of our country, as in regards to the Budna affair and many others. But that's the end of that part of the presentation, and I want to take the next few minutes before the show is completed at the appointed time to say that our system of governance in Belize is currently being bastardized in more ways than one. And not only by the executive, by the way, they are the most gross violators of our Belizean constitution by far among the previous governments that we have had. This current government that we have, this current PUP government, from the time they stepped into office, from the inception, in fact, before they even stepped into office, they had been doing things that their very supporter who had just elected them were aggrieved about and were saying that they should not be doing some of those things or targeting some of those actions or efforts. But they are the most egregious of the offenders and the violators of our constitution, far greater than the UDP that preceded them. And that UDP was a gross violator of the Belize constitution and the governance practices of Belize, much more so than the previous PUP government that was in office before them, and under Mr. Musa. The UDP government was under Mr. Barrow. And under Mr. Musa, the Musa government was more onerous and far more treacherous than the Esquivel government that preceded it. And the Esquivel government was more treacherous than the previous PUP government under Mr. Price that preceded it. And the government under Mr. Price was more onerous and violators of our constitution than the government under Mr. Esquivel in the first Esquivel administration. And that Esquivel government was much more treacherous than the PUP government that preceded under Mr. Price. Why is it that Mr. Price's government got sacked in 1984? Because of their dastardly conduct and their treacherousness. And prior to that Esquivel government, you had the PUP government under Mr. Price again, for many decades, as a matter of fact, who ruled the political environment of that time under the PUP government led by Mr. Price. So, from the time of the independence of Belize until today day that we are having this discussion, every successive government has done worse than its predecessor. And the current government is no different, to the point where, because people re-elected them despite their criminal and evil behavior and actions, they don't try to give the people good governance or proper governance. As a matter of fact, they're not even trying to give the people any governance per se. Because most government departments right now, they're doing like the politicians. They're all venturing on the big hustle. Very few government departments you can go to today and get any kind of treatment like you used to get years ago, where the civil servants, as servants of the people, would help the people to navigate the system of governance in order for them to get their services. Now you have to depend on outsiders, friends of the civil servants, who get a fee from people who go and pay them to navigate the system. And then those civil servants, in addition to their salary, get a little kickback from their friends who act as agents on behalf of the general population who need the government services. You cannot go to the government offices and get no government services now without an intermediary who you have to provide a mordida to that gives a piece of that mordida back to the civil servants. That's a bastardization of our system of governance. And it starts all the way from the top. When the Prime Minister is going to go and violate our Constitution to take away private property from Mr. Stefan and his venture, and take that private property under the name of eminent domain on behalf of the public and the powers of the people. When the Constitution says that the government should not be indulging in that kind of behavior. He takes away the man's private property to give it to another private entity under the guise that he's taking it away under eminent domain, which means that you're using the power of state to acquire assets on behalf of the state and the people of the state. And we have no shares in that company as of today's date. And then they turn around and give the other people them 25, 30 years of concessions, tax-free, duty-free, and all kind of other economic development benefits that accrues no kind of taxation or assistance by these investors to the treasury of Belize and the people of Belize. Okay? In fact, the taxes that were supposed to go to the government of Belize, what they call the head tax for tourism, most of it now is being kept by the tourist organizations. That's why they keep claiming that they don't have money to finance the government adequately and to buy the gauze and the swabs and all the necessary things that they need for the hospitals and for the schools and to pay the teachers them and to pay the other civil servants them. They are not giving us governance, much less good governance. And it's not because they can't or are unable or incapable. If they don't thief the damn money, enough money would be there to meet the obligations of the state. But what they don't thief, they squander, giving bogus contracts to favored people who give them a little kickback for their financing of their political activities. I could talk about these things because I know where the damn skeletons are. I know how the process works. And for some of them who don't know, I could tell them how much money they have in their bank account. I could tell them what their bank account is, how much they put in, how much they take out, when they put in, when they take out. I have that capability. Of course, it is not supposed to be public, or it's not the public business. But there's a part of it that is the public business. That is that each of these political entities, what you call political exposed persons in the geopolitical arena, any politically exposed person supposed to do financial reporting and other reporting on an annual basis while they're in politics, to the extent that their assets supposed to be enumerated and presented. But they don't do that. Why? Because when some of them went into politics, they never had 2 pennies to rub together. And now, after being in office for 1 term, they are millionaires. Their salary doesn't afford that privilege to become a millionaire in 1 term. And if they survive 2 terms, they become multi-millionaire. And if they're in there for 3 terms or more, they become multi-millionaires. All at the shore of the public assets. They steal up the lands. They give the lands to themselves and their cronies and friends and other relatives by the thousands of acres in some instances. The current Prime Minister can explain that to you, and the previous Prime Minister had explained it to you when he asked whether or not Mr. Briceño was going to go with the whole of a certain, I think it was Progreso, was the name of the development and the village. They take thousands of acres of land. I forced the return of a computer to the lands department that the PUP government under Mr. Musa was trying to get rid of. I had that computer returned back to the lands department from a young lady, who said that it was given to her to be disposed of. Why were they so interested in disposing with the information that was on that hard drive? Because it tells a story about who was getting lands, how many acres of lands was being given out to preferred people, some of whom were not paying for those lands. They were not purchasing it. They were not paying no taxes for decades. Big tracts of lands. While they go and take away house lot lands from some people because they don't have a job or they can't afford it, or because some of them gone to the States, right? And then the people that are left back here living in the property don't have no money to repair it, so the property falls apart, the building gets old, and then they take the people in lots for taxes. And they sell those lots among themselves at the city council for less than, 1/10 of what it is worth. They sell it to themselves, and they take it and then turn it around and sell it to the real estate agents then, or to other people, for a big killing. All that kind of shenanigans is going on in our country. And it's not by omission, it's not by oversight, and it's not by mistake. It's a deliberate process of what you call the big hustle. Those who can hustle out of the treasury directly, hustle money that's supposed to go to the treasury. Some of it is embezzled. As in the case of where GST tax is being collected by various merchants and not being turned over to the government. That deprives the government of assets or of resources, of money. And when we tell the people in the government that is what's happening, and we tell them to go and check on these people at the various stores, they come back and tell us, as Mr. Mai had said before, that we are lying on the people, and that he went and had some drinks with the people, and they discussed the matter, and the people told him that they are not stealing from the Belizean population or from the government. And then the ministers come and tell us we are lying on the people because the people are his friends, and the people confide to him that they're not committing any such crimes. Instead of having a proper investigation. Why? Those people pull their money together when election, and they turn it over to the ministers them or the different political entities them to finance campaigns. Do we think that we will ever get good governance out of people who are not under the pressure of UNCAC, who are robbing us blind, who are not helping the poor and the less marginal people in our society? Instead, what they're doing is they're taking the authority and the powers of state, of the government, and creating bogus laws that are contrary to our Constitution. Some of those laws, according to what the Constitution says in Section 2, are null and void. Even though a lot of them get together and create it. They create it and they know that it's unconstitutional, and if it's unconstitutional, it's null and void. You cannot create an unconstitutional law and make it constitutional if it's unconstitutional. What part of that you don't understand or wish to entertain? if it's null and void, if it's unconstitutional, if it's bogus, it's not lawful, it's not legal. But yet you use it to cause harm to people in the black part of the community of our society and our country. Because you want to target them and you want to marginalize them instead of uplifting them. That's what governance is. We're now coming to the end of our show for tonight, of course, and you'll hear me babbling in your ears and, getting a little bit aggressive as regards to our government of the day. Anybody who knows me can tell you that I was as aggressive as I am right now with the previous government of that day under the UDP. I am an equal offender of those who offend my country. I am not an offender just of the people because of their political namesake or their political categorization. I'm an offender of those people who offend and do wrong to my country, whether it be UDP, PUP, or any kind of P whatsoever. At the least, you will hear from me if you're not doing right. And that's my God-given prerogative and rights. That's my constitutionally imbued rights. That's my human rights. And that's my blood-sworn vanguard agenda for the rest of my life. So all I could say to you Belizeans at home and abroad tonight, unless we all become vanguards of our country, some of us more so than others, we can kiss our country goodbye, because we are being hauled and pulled from within and from without. As a matter of fact, from within, our demography has been changed substantively to the point where Belizeans no more control Belizean affairs. People have to spend their time trying to hustle on a day-to-day basis, scratch out one least survival means. There's not enough jobs to accommodate everybody, but yet you're going to bring in more people into the country who will contribute nothing to the country other than because they're classified as gang members or as criminals who other countries don't want, that we decide to take. We don't have no money to build no supermax jail like El Salvador or like Guatemala. In fact, the present jail that we have right now is not operating good enough for our local population and the level of criminal conduct or activities going on in our country. Why the hell are we going to be playing crazy and making agreements with other third-party countries or other countries to accommodate people in our country when we can handle the little problems that we have currently? We're going to take on the rest of the world for a few dollars more so that our politicians can have enough money, foreign exchange money, so that they can travel abroad and the money could still be accepted because we have a good enough reserve. Then change the money. They make the money like I don't know how to call it. But at the end of the day, the Guatemalans don't want to accept our new money. The Mexicans are kind of skittish. And all the other Caribbean countries and other places that, where we could have probably gone and spend our money and, have our money be credited for us, we can't do that. In fact, the central bank is creating problems right now. They want to determine how much money they want to let you spend of your own money and when you could spend it and who you're going to spend it with. They have to have a report. All these onerous rules and regulations that our constitution says they're not supposed to be entertaining and or governing us with. Yet they go ahead and do so. Why? They have no regards, respect, and consideration for our constitution. And not having any regards and consideration for our constitution, they don't have any regards and consideration for our people. They treat us with disdain and disrespect. Nevertheless, we have come to the end of our program for tonight. I'm sorry for babbling in your ears, like I said, and getting all emotional about all this craziness that's going on. But somebody got to say something about it, because we need to have people step to the plate and not only say something about it, but do something about it. And not much can be done if the people are going to continue electing and granting their power of governance to the same bunch of hyenas, drunkards, kleptocrats, and whatever else not. Then they come and tell us, for example, right now with the situation with Mr. Mai, the Prime Minister is going to hell currently to try and convince the Belizean people that the Mai scenario is what he is stipulating it to be, and not what most of us have already heard and recognized it to be. That is that the man, Mr. Mai, was stripped of his privilege to function in government because of the pressures that was brought on the Prime Minister by foreign agents. So it says to me that our Prime Minister is more beholden to the powers of foreign agents than to the powers that we, the Belizean people, confer on him to act on our behalf as our government leader. And the man refused to stop lying, as if lies gonna make us any more better. Tell us the truth and get it over with. You're working on our behalf, or you're supposed to be working on our behalf. I yield to the end of this program for tonight, because there's a lot more that I would like to speak to. We have come to the end of the show by at least 1 minute late already now. And I just want to say thank you, Belizeans at home and abroad, and others who have listened to our program while it was live tonight, and those who will spend their valuable time at their own convenience to listen to it, as we have noticed many of you do. We get hundreds and hundreds of people. As a matter of fact, so far, we have had hundreds of thousands of people listening to our different programs, and we have had over 1 million so far listening to all the other postings that we have done in the different platforms that we operate. And for that, we are eternally grateful, because we know that people just don't visit the sites and read those things and go away uninformed. They go there to read our stuff and to interact with our stuff because they think of it as, more likely or not, having some value to them. And that's all we're trying to do. We're not being paid for our work, nor are we asking for anything in return from anybody other than to try and cooperate to help make our country the better place that we all would like for it to be. So I would like to say good night. Thank you very much again. And this was your humble servant, Leonard Brackett, who acted as the chairman for tonight's program. And this program was and will continue to be, of course, because it's now historically recorded, as program number 364 of the Belizean Affairs programs. They're all there on the internet for those of you who have an interest in learning and understanding a little bit more about our country, and in seeing what we are trying to present or offer as additional input to our people and country of Belize. Thank you very much, and good night.